On Sky News at 5 o'clock, Blunkett under scrutiny. The Pensions Secretary will make a statement about the shares row in the next few minutes, but will that make it go away? That's our top story. 5 more reasons to watch Live at 5 this Monday. Plug into Britain, the new test for budding citizens. Boozing battleground, the rising casualties of binge drinking. Knives online, the children's market for deadly weapons. Tresco's ton, but England's top order make a shaky start in Pakistan. And flying without moving, the how to get them top of the latest adrenaline rush.
Live from the Sky News Centre, this is Live at 5 with Jeremy Thompson.
Good evening. In the next few minutes, David Blunkett will make a statement about the shares he bought in a DNA testing company. In the last few minutes, Sky's cameras caught him leaving Downing Street. The Conservatives claim that he's breaking ministerial rules by keeping the shares. They could make him rich if the company goes public. Today, the Prime Minister said Mr. Blunkett should be allowed to get on with his job. DNA Bioscience make and sell paternity home testing kits. A similar kind of kit was used by Mr. Blunkett during the dispute over whether he was the father of Kimberly Quinn's child Lorcan. Mr. Blunkett took up the director's role with the firm before this year's general election, but resigned when he was recalled to the Cabinet just 2 weeks later. The rules surrounding ministers' business activities are very strict. The Code of Conduct states, on leaving office, ministers should seek advice from the Independent Advisory Committee on Business Appointments about any appointments they wish to take up within 2 years of leaving office. There should be no cause for any suspicion of impropriety about a particular appointment. The Work and Pensions Secretary admits he did not consult the Advisory Committee. Despite that, Tony Blairs given the Sheffield MP his backing.
I do give him my confidence. Look, in respect of the allegations about the shareholding, I know David's looking into that. I've been dealing with other things today. But I think that he should be allowed to get on with his job, which is very important.
Mr. Blunkett also bought shares in the company for his sons. DNA Bioscience is attempting to float on the stock exchange, and that could mean a large windfall for his family. All this has led to the Conservatives calling for a full inquiry.
There are real concerns about what Mr. Blunkett's done, not simply in terms of the process he didn't go through in notifying the advisory committee on what he was doing, but also whether he should have bought these shares in the first place. At least now we see signs that the government realises this is a serious issue and is starting to do something about it.
Sky's political editor Adam Bolton joins us now live from Downing Street. Evening, Adam. Any clue about this statement?
I think the fact that the Prime Minister said that David was dealing with the matter of his shares does point to the suggestion that the government is going to attempt to put a line under this by this written statement we're now expecting from David Blunkett, saying that he has sold the shares which he'd put in trust, having bought himself for £15,000 in his son's name, and it may well say that he's done something to avoid personal gain with any profits in the share price. Now, the government clearly hopes that that will be what they call David Blunkett putting to rights any errors he may have made in terms of ministerial conduct. I will be very surprised indeed if the opposition decide to let it lie there, although the Prime Minister's spokesman has said that the Prime Minister is content with what David Blunkett plans to do and that expects him to stay in the government. It was clear that David Blunkett came here to Downing Street this afternoon for a crisis meeting, I imagine, with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Gus O'Donnell, and as you saw, he left here a few minutes ago. It may well be that his statement in written form to the wire services will be followed by some television interviews.
Adam, listening to what the Prime Minister had to say and listening to the somewhat resounding silence from most of Mr. Blunkett's Cabinet colleagues, damned with faint praise would come to mind.
Yes, I think it's significant that the words from the Prime Minister point more to personal support for David than for full confidence in his role as a Cabinet Minister and Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Indeed, the fact that the Prime Minister is appealing for David Blunkett to be able to get on with his job is an admission that he knows these attacks are a distraction. That said, I think in Downing Street they do think there's been what they call open season on relatively small allegations of misconduct against David Blunkett, which taken individually would not necessarily be capital offences. And it does appear, following the experience with Peter Mandelson, who of course returned to the Cabinet for a second time and then went for not very good reason, there does seem to be a determination to stand by David Blunkett, particularly given the admiration for the way in which he's overcome his disability. And that makes David Blunkett a very lucky man, because he's been very accident prone, both in his conduct of his private business as a minister and in his own private life for at least the last 2 years.
Thanks, Adam. You're watching Sky News Live at 5. All the stories making the news this evening. Next, what it means to be British. It's not just cricket and cucumber sandwiches. Later, hunting with birds, the latest way to beat the ban. Plus, pumpkin fever, how Halloween rings hollow on the water. All that and more, live at 5. So what does it mean to be British? If you're thinking roast beef, warm beer, Blackpool pier, well, you're wrong. It's all about knowing the voltage of your plug sockets, what the Queen does and where Geordies come from. Those are all part of a new Home Office test for people who apply to be British citizens. There are no questions about history. Instead, the exam's designed to teach people how to integrate into life into the UK and to share British values. Sky's Victoria Brining has been taking a look at what it all involves.
Well, the citizenship test is made up of 24 questions covering history, law and society. Some of the questions include: when did 18-year-olds get the vote? Is it A, 1918, B, 1928 or C, 1969? Well, more recent than you thought perhaps. The answer is C. Another question, if you didn't get that one right: if you spill somebody's pint in a pub, what usually happens next? A, you would offer to buy the person another pint. B, you would offer to dry their wet shirt with your own. Or C, you may need to prepare for a fight in the car park. Well, the only British thing to do is buy them a pint. The answer is A, naturally. So how did the average Brit fare on the test? Which of these courts uses a jury system? Magistrates Court, Crown Court, Youth Court, County Court?
Magistrate.
Crown.
Can you say the question again, please?
Magistrates Court.
I'd say Crown Court, she says it, yeah.
County? Magistrates?
Or Crown Court.
Crown Court. But the test may not be necessary. A survey from the Commission for Racial Equality found people who most strongly identify themselves as British are from ethnic minorities, whereas British whites would be more likely to describe themselves as English, Scottish, Welsh or Northern Irish.
It's now less than a month till drinking round the clock becomes legal in England and Wales. The government's confident the plans will work, but critics say they're no more than a licence to crime, binge drinking and violence. So how bad could things get? We sent Sky News cameras into a hospital in Scotland where extended drinking hours have been a reality for years.
Drunk, violent and injured. Wounded, bloodied and very often angry. It's an alarmingly routine night at this Scottish hospital A&E department. Of course, you'd expect to find injured and drunk people here, but even doctors accustomed to seeing the after effects of violence say it's getting worse.
Tend to be seeing a lot more high violent assaults where people are really getting into big fights. There's a lot of people coming in who've been stamped on as well, using implements, bottles. I think things are generally getting a little bit worse. The level of intoxication that we see is much higher, and we have our ward here where we observe people, and we're seeing an awful lot more young people coming in really collapsed states, all due to alcohol.
You were unconscious for about a minute.
This man was attacked in the street because a drunken group took exception to his long hair.
I don't think it's a case of Scotland becoming more violent. I think it's just society at large. It's just the way it is later on at night. there's no control.
And that's the question that's proving the most difficult for politicians and policymakers to address. Paul Brennan, Sky News.
We showed our report to the Culture Secretary, Tessa Jowell. She defended the government plans.
We are determined, therefore, through the Licensing Act and through the powers that we'll be taking under the Violent Crime Bill, to give the police additional powers to crack down on that kind of behaviour, and we will not tolerate it. And we will also hold licensees to account. They will have to justify the responsibility they have for selling alcohol.
Let's go nationwide now. 3 people have been charged with the murder of a 23-year-old man during riots in Birmingham. Isaiah Young Sam died after being stabbed in the Lozells area of the city during clashes between Asian and black youths earlier this month. The 3 men will appear in court tomorrow. An Al-Qaeda suspect being held in the UK will no longer face extradition because authorities have taken too long to act. Faj Hassan Faraj was originally imprisoned for possession of a stolen passport back in 2002. He continued to be held after Italy requested extradition. Now a 3-year deadline's passed. It's thought that he'll be deported to Libya. British mobile phone company O2 has agreed a takeover offer worth nearly £18 billion. The company will keep its UK base and branding following the deal with the Spanish telecoms giant Telefonica. Now, for those who think modern life doesn't offer enough thrills, how about free-falling with the wind whipping your face at 150 miles an hour and no parachute? It's the very latest hit on offer for adrenaline junkies. Sky's David Bowden went along to put it to the test.
A leisure complex in Milton Keynes might not be the first place you'd think of to go skydiving, but the machine behind me, according to the people who run this place, is the only purpose-built vertical wind tunnel in the British Isles. It can create speeds of up to 170 miles per hour and is pretty much skydiving without the plane. They say it's perfectly safe, and if you're reasonably fit and healthy, anybody can have a go. Do we believe them? I'm going to find out for myself. Weightlessness, and you can feel the wind really tugging and punching at your body, but you feel almost as if you're without your own body, really. It's a surreal experience. Now, the people here say that you can stay in these for anything up to an hour, but it really is quite fatiguing. That was less than a minute that I've just done, and it really is quite tiring, but I suspect this will probably be a big hit with the stag parties and the corporate events organisers.
For all of those who were inquiring, David Bowden has now got his body back. Sure you'll be pleased to hear. Let's go worldwide now. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall will visit hurricane-hit New Orleans as part of their US tour. The Prince is due to arrive in the States tomorrow. Before he left, he gave an interview to an American television channel. In it, he spoke about his role in modern society.
I've always believed that ever since I was quite young, I think that the most important thing is to be relevant, and so I mean, it isn't easy, as you can imagine, because if you say anything, people then say it's all right for you to say that. It's very easy to just dismiss anything I say. So I mean, it's difficult, but what I've tried to do is to put my money where my mouth is.
To India now, and the Prime Minister there says there are indications the bomb attacks in Delhi had links to Pakistan. At least 62 people were killed, more than 200 injured in Saturday's blast. Indian police say they believe all the attacks were carried out by one group. President Bush has nominated Samuel Alito, an experienced federal judge, as his latest choice for the Supreme Court. His original choice, Harriet Miers, withdrew last week after criticism from both Republicans and Democrats. They claimed she was too inexperienced for the role. In Live at 5, thousands paid their respects to the heroine of the US civil rights movement. Some of Britain's hunts have found a way to get around the ban on dogs. They're using birds of prey instead. It's claimed up to 50 groups are using eagles and hawks, and that's angered the country's traditional falconers.
It looks and sounds like an ordinary hunt, but what makes this one different is the presence of a bird of prey, increasingly used by hunts around the country to exploit what they see as a loophole in the law. These pictures of the Cattistock hunt on the Somerset-Dorset border were filmed by anti-hunt campaigners. The bird is believed to be a Saker falcon. And this is the same breed in the hands of a man with decades of experience. Jim Chick says it's impossible for a bird like this to kill a fox.
Falconry does not mix with packs of hounds in the field. It never has done, and it never will do. They simply should not be in the hunting field.
The Cattistock hunts say they were experimenting with the use of the falcon as one way of beating the ban. The new law on hunting says any number of hounds can be used to flush out quarry for a bird of prey to kill. Some hunts seem to believe that if they ride out with a bird of prey, they're immune from prosecution even if the bird doesn't fly. The issue could well be tested in the courts, and the falconers say they will act as hostile witnesses against their former friends.
We would be very upset if that were to be the case, but we have to protect the future of falconry. That's our prime issue here. And whilst we are very friendly and many of us are involved in the hunting field from time to time, nevertheless, that our prime concern is the future of our sport and the welfare of these birds.
This is an African fish eagle, but some hunts are believed to be using golden eagles. That's a bird of a similar size and just as dangerous if not handled properly. The falconers believe that if hunts continue to use birds of prey, a hound, a horse or even a rider is going to get seriously hurt. Andrew Moore, Sky News.
Sky News Active, a place to check out all the latest headline news there and have a look at see what the weather's doing. And business, show business and sport, of course, but stay with us for sport. John Desborough here in just a moment. First, I'll bring you the top 3 headlines on Live at 5. In the next few minutes, David Blunkett's going to be making a statement about those shares he bought in a DNA testing company. The Conservatives claim he's breaking ministerial rules by keeping the shares. Today, the Prime Minister said Mr Blunkett should be allowed to get on with his job. A new test is being introduced tomorrow for people who want to be British citizens. The questions include knowing who needs a television licence, what the Queen does and where Geordies come from. Youngsters have been able to buy knives and alcohol on the internet without any checks to see if they're over 18. Officials are now calling for the government to consider complete bans on the sales of knives on the net. Sky Report is coming up at 7. Here's Julie with more.
Jeremy, thanks very much. Well, tomorrow the victims of 7/7 will be remembered in a special memorial service. Tonight we have a special report from Beeston, including inside the gym where the bombers used to meet. Your thoughts on this question, please. Have we learned the lessons of 7/7? That's at 7 tonight. See you then.
Thanks, Julie. And 5, Live at 5, all the sport with John Desborough. We're going to be talking cricket. England's tour of Pakistan finally underway for real today. First, though, it's time for today's Sound Up, when we let the pictures do the talking. When Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white man half a century ago, she sparked a revolt which ultimately led to the end of racial segregation in America. After her death last week, she's become the first woman to lie in state in the US Capitol Rotunda, a tribute usually reserved for presidents. More than 30,000 people have already made the journey to pay tribute to the heroine of America's civil rights movement.
She was a revolutionary in a very dignified way. And I can't imagine what our country would be like had it not been for Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks. Time now for a look at all the sport with Desi. Evening, John. Now, I'm intrigued. Tell me how Yasser Arafat upset England's cricketers.
With a few wickets today when really you would have thought England, great, glorious team that beat Australia, and we all saw it this summer, kind of went out there and, well, to begin with, weren't particularly clever. One or two of the top names weren't there, so we can excuse them for that, but out they went, won the toss, decided to bat, and well, one or two wickets kind of went down. Like Andrew Strauss, you know, he wants to bat himself in and convince himself that he's going to play well this tour and he's going to cement his place in the team. When that happened, he went for 5. The captain himself wasn't particularly clever. I think he went for 9 on top of that. You might want to turn away here because these are shocking pictures. If you read Michael Vaughan on captaincy and strategy in his brand new book. But as Vaughan would say to you, when all of this is going on and people around you are losing their heads, there's always one man in the England cricket team somewhere who will not lose his head and you can rely on. And today that person was Marcus Trescothick. Thank heavens for Marcus, because he went on to wallop about 120 and he was the hero of the day. Matt Pryor, by the way, who's a bit of a new name to the squad, got 50 off 63, so that was quite handy as well. He's there as a sort
He's going to put some pressure on Geraint Jones, but I mean, I should explain, Yasser Arafat was the first change bowler, got 4 for 45 and ripped through the middle order. Well, he got Collingwood, Bell, Jones and Pryor eventually, so he did a job there.
And one of the excuses that was offered up was none of the top Pakistani bowlers were featuring in this match, which does make you worry slightly, in that they've held them all back for when the Test series starts itself on the 12th. But then Yasser, it's a great name, and we must find out a lot more about him.
Yeah.
So hands up from me for not knowing more about the great man Yasser Arafat, but I thought I'd give you that gag.
On you go.
Alex Loudon, by the way, featured at the end, but there were no Flintoff, no Steve Harmison, and no Peterson either. Here's what the hero of the day said at the end of play.
There's obviously 3 more innings in terms of game practice. We've still got sort of 4 or 5 days of practice in the nets, really. So, you know, it's early days, isn't it? You don't want to really peak too early. Obviously, today was nice to get 100, but, you know, in the context of the tour, it's pretty irrelevant.
Top man. Other stories today were Portsmouth have fined Laurent Robert for a breach of club discipline. The Frenchman walked out on the team before Saturday's win at Sunderland after he was left out of the starting lineup. Interesting reaction. Robert claims he had a groin injury and he's apologised. The Blackburn manager Mark Hughes has escaped an FA misconduct charge. Hughes was sent off by referee Mike Riley for kicking a water bottle during Saturday's defeat at Chelsea, but he's not going to face any further punishment. And there might just be a new British tennis #1 by the end of the week. It could be this fella, the old flame Greg Rosiecki. He's made just the start he was looking for in the Paris Masters with a straight set win over the Italian Andrea Seppi. If he can reach the 3rd round, Rosiecki will move above Henman. To do that, he's got to beat a guy called Nikolai Davydenko, who he plays next. He's a big, big hitting Russian. And the golfer Paul McGinley has moved into the world's top 20 for the very first time. Victory in the Volvo Masters at the weekend took the Irishman from 26th place to 18th. Holly Montgomery stays at 15th despite his 3rd place finish at Valderrama.
Great story, Monty, really, but must move on to football. Villa.
Fancy buying Aston Villa?
No, but Prince William might. A devoted fan.
I wonder what he would make of Aston Villa. Are they worth 64 million quid? A couple of guys in Ireland who do a lot of building and developing. Fancy Villa.
Not called Magna and...
No, not this time. Well, there is that aspect of when
but
Irish
Ellis, would he really go? I mean, how long has he been in charge?
Well, he's not well. He's been in charge for a long, long time, and I mean, his involvement goes right the way back to the 60s. This £64 million would buy Doug Ellis' stake in the club Also Jack Petches, so that would be about 58% of the club that the Irish would buy. They would then go around the rest of the investors and convince them that it was the right thing to do. Villa fans tonight asking, well, is this good for the club? So tonight on Sportsline at 6:30, all those questions. If you're on the Villa board, what do you look for? How do you know a good investor from a bad one? How do you know if 64 million quid is the right value for the club when they're paying about £5.60 per share? All those things on Sportsline tonight.
And can I make a Midlands club get to the top of the Premiership, which is the big question they'll all be asking. See you at 6:30. Thanks very much. You're watching Sky News. Later, live at 5, Standing Down, what's behind the latest step on the path to peace in Northern Ireland, why calls are being made for knives to be banned from sale on the internet, and just what is being British. That's one of the topics on today's Weblog Spot.
There's a new day at Sky News.
I'll be live at 5 in the Sky News studio. We're telling you the stories that matter most.
My Sky Report team will deliver a gender-setting analysis at 7 o'clock. It's going to be fresh, fiery appointment to View Television.
I'll be offering an international perspective with World News Tonight at 8.
I hope to bring behind-the-scenes analysis from my days as a Clinton official.
All this and the latest breaking stories. Sky News. News people.
Vectra and new Signum. Take control.
The price of everyday healthcare keeps rising. That's why HSA now gives you 100% cash back on dentist bills up to £360. Cash for a new arrival is great too. And we can help with 75% of physiotherapy, osteopathy or chiropractic bills up to £400. So you can choose the treatment you want and when you want it. So why not phone right now? Cover starts from £2 per person per week and it's immediate, so you can start to claim straight away. The majority of claims are usually paid within 2 days. Call now on 0800 072 6716. You're even covered for 75% of consultation costs up to £800, which could help you get better quicker. Speak to us to benefit from HSA's best ever value for money healthcare deal. How about 100% cash back for up to £360 of opticians' bills? Join us now and we'll give you M&S vouchers worth £15 free. Call now and join us on 0800 072 6716. HSA, a healthier place to be.
Welcome back to Live at 5. Some breaking news now. The Work and Pensions Secretary, David Blunkett, has asked his sons to authorise trustees to dispose of the shares in the technology firm DNA Bioscience, and they've agreed, he said tonight. A second line, Mr. Blunkett is quoted as saying in the last moment or so, taken this step not only to avoid continuing misinterpretation of the position, but to protect family and friends from further intrusion. Adam Bolton, our political editor, joins us now from Downing Street. What do you make of the brief and terse statements that have come out so far, Adam?
Well, frankly, it's pretty much what we were anticipating, that he would try and dispose of the shares to put this matter behind him. But clearly, I think we will see opposition politicians asking questions such as why is he disposing of the shares if, as he believes, he'd done nothing wrong and he's already put it to rights, and does the government accept that he has breached the ministerial code as he has admitted he has done? And if he has, they will say, what is the standards that Mr. Blair is now applying to the conduct of his senior ministers? Because in the foreword of that very same ministerial code, Mr. Blair said he expected ministers to abide by the spirit and not just the letter of the code. And I think the view would probably be taken that that's certainly not something which Mr. Blunkett has done so far, although he's now trying to put things right belatedly.
I noticed that in this brief statement, Mr. Blunkett talks about taking this step not only to avoid continuing misinterpretation of the position, but to protect family and friends from further intrusion. He uses that word, suggesting that he obviously feels rather hard done to by all this, rather than suggesting or admitting that perhaps his step strayed slightly out of line with those ministerial guidelines.
Yes, he's obviously playing for sympathy. Incidentally, my understanding is that the sons that he put this in trust for are the sons from his marriage. Of course, he's now divorced, not the son he had by Kimberly Quinn, and for which, ironically enough, he sought a DNA test. Certainly, I think there is a feeling in Downing Street that there's, as they put it, open season on Mr. Blunkett, that people are now looking for him to slip up, and that perhaps the things which are being reported about him are not things which, if he wasn't already in the firing line, would be seen to be significant. I have to say that you don't have to go very far to encounter Labour MPs, even former ministers, who disagree with that, who think now that it's Mr. Blunkett's repeated mistakes which have made him a target rather than any malice by the media.
Adam, just a third line's dropped on this. Mr. Blunkett said the firm, this is DNA Bioscience, had no contracts with his department or the Child Support Agency, and he had not made any representations on its behalf or given it any advice. And he added, quote, "There has therefore been no conflict of interest." But as you were saying, Adam, so much of Westminster life is about perceptions, images, what is seen to be the right thing to do as opposed to what is the correct behaviour.
Yes, and I think that statement is rather carefully worded. As far as I know, the issue has been not that there are existing contracts, but that this relatively new company is seeking contracts which have not yet been awarded to them. Also, of course, there is the issue of Mr. Blunkett's friendship with Tariq Siddiqui. It is thought that Mr. Siddiqui introduced him to the blonde estate agent who subsequently sold her story to the newspapers. Mr. Siddiqui has certainly had his critics in the business world. And although David Blunkett told the House of Commons today, as he said in that statement, that he has done nothing to help that company, he was briefly a director of it before he returned as a cabinet minister, and it has certainly been reported that he's continued to meet Mr. Siddiqui on a social basis. Doubtless, again, the opposition will want to ask questions about that.
So you're suggesting the debate that is going on in Westminster among colleagues, opponents, and just fellow MPs is this a witch hunt, as Mr. Blunkett would suggest, or is it a very worthy and well-couched criticism of his general demeanour and behaviour in the last few months and years?
Well, crucially, Mr. Blunkett has admitted making mistakes. He admitted he made a mistake not talking about a business relationship with another company back in March when he was warned what the rules are. He's now admitted mistakes about his business relationship with this company, DNA Bioscience, and he's now selling shares, which certainly implies that he believes he's in an uncomfortable potential conflict of interest. Meanwhile, he's admitted to misusing a House of Commons note paper. So it's not a question of baseless charges, it's just he is basically saying these don't amount to anything. Now, I think the situation is that Mr. Blunkett does still have the personal support of the Prime Minister, who presumably wants to keep him in his government, not least because to lose Mr. Blunkett would cause a crisis for Mr. Blair as well. But I think the feeling is that in the Labour Party, certainly Mr. Blunkett is beginning to run out of friends.
Adam, thanks very much indeed. So let's just remind you what Adam and I have been discussing over the last couple of minutes. David Blunkett, now Work and Pension Secretary, of course, has asked his sons to authorise trustees to dispose of the shares in the technology firm DNA Bioscience, and they've agreed. He said he'd take the step not only to avoid continuing misinterpretation of the position, but to protect his family and friends from further intrusion. And of course, the debate goes on about the ministerial code of conduct and how it's being interpreted in this case. Other headlines now. A new test is being introduced tomorrow for people who want to be British citizens. The questions include knowing who needs a television licence, what the Queen does and where Geordies come from. Youngsters have been able to buy knives and alcohol on the internet without any checks to see if they're over 18. Officials are now calling for the government to consider a complete ban on the sale of knives on the net. Sky's Joel Hills reports.
This is a ripper saw for going through snow.
And it's one of a series of knives purchased by a 13-year-old boy using the internet. Richard Beckett went on a shopping spree using his Solo card, a payment card, not a credit card, available to anyone over the age of 11. Retailers should have checked his date of birth, but they didn't.
I thought it'd be a lot harder. I didn't think I'd get anything, but I got all this.
We borrowed Richard's Solo card details and went surfing for ourselves. First up, the Argos website and a 7-piece knife set. Argos checked his accounts to ensure funds were available, but they didn't check his age. The order was duly processed, home delivery guaranteed.
I think retailers have got to get used to the fact that they're web traders now as well as high street traders, and that presents a whole new range of issues and problems. And the information we're publishing today is by way of a wake-up call to those retailers to work hard on getting their act together.
The fact is, more and more young people are carrying knives. 4 years ago, 4,616 were found guilty of having a blade in a public place. Last year, the number of convictions had reached 6,839, a rise of 67%. And the consequences are being felt on the front line of the NHS.
It varies from purpose-built knives, flick knives, lock knives, which can really only be described as being for one use, and that is violence, to your standard kitchen knife. We see steak knives in people's pockets, we see things like that. And we can also see, a screwdriver is quite a common implement to carry around.
This is how they deal with the problem of knives in schools in the United States. The British government wants to give teachers here the power to carry out random searches, but if its violent crime reduction bill does become law next year, it will be too late for Luke Walmsley. The 14-year-old was stabbed by a fellow pupil at his school in Lincolnshire in November 2003. A street crime carried out in the school corridor. Joel Hills, Sky News.
And we've had this statement from Argos, who are in that report. Argos, to quote them, Argos take this issue very seriously. We believe that our safeguards are similar to most other retailers. However, we'll review our procedures in light of your inquiry to see if there are any ways in which we can make them more robust. One of those issues that could well come up in the blog spot from time to time. Now let's have a look at what you've been talking about, what you're interested in today on the blog spot. Tim's here to take us through it. A test for people wanting to be British. That's aroused a bit of interest today. What are people saying?
Yeah, definitely one of the day's main talking points. And Nick was one of the first people to go onto our weblog and post his comment this morning. He wrote, "A lot of Brits have decided to move over to Spain. Could they discuss the political movements, structure, foundation and history of the country? No. If I or any of my colleagues had to do this test, we would probably be sent out of the country."
I'm just going to butt in there, Tim, because we've got a little bit of breaking news. Prime Minister's now commented on the Tony Blair, on the David Blunkett issue. The Prime Minister is saying he believes that no further action is needed and the matter is now closed. That's a spokesman from Number 10 on behalf of the Prime Minister relating to the statement about David Blunkett. Adam Bolton, our political editor, standing by listening to that in Downing Street. Just a quick thought from you on that. Tony Blair, very quick to respond.
Yes, and indeed in advance his spokesman had said that he was content with what David Blunkett had to say. In a sense, the Prime Minister saying the matter is now closed does say that the government does not intend to respond any further to any charges. It is now a matter for the opposition to raise questions if they think something improper has been done. Certainly, it would seem to me that on the basis that these shares are now being sold, there is a prima facie case to say if nothing had been done wrong, they wouldn't have to be disposed of. As far as I could tell also from David Blunkett's statement, there was no word as to any profit which the Blunketts may have accrued while they've held these shares. Certainly the opposition has already said that if there is any profit made, that should be given to charity rather than to benefit David Blunkett and his family. And finally, of course, there remains the question that the Prime Minister apparently is now saying no further action is appropriate for a minister who admits that he has not followed the ministerial code. That, I imagine, is something which the opposition will want to take up in precisely the same way that in the final years of the Major government, you may remember, during the so-called sleaze years, the opposition, headed by a man I seem to remember called Tony Blair, used to take up these questions in the other direction.
I was going to say, just because the Prime Minister said that's an end to it, doesn't necessarily draw a line underneath it at all.
No, it doesn't, and it's possible that there are other avenues that the opposition might pursue, such as referring these matters to the House of Commons if they feel that there have been breaches of codes of conduct and reporting there. And as we've seen before, I mean, you know, whenever a minister gets in trouble, we constantly hear governments saying they want to draw a line under it. Not surprisingly, they don't always succeed.
Do you think this is going to give rise, Adam, to a much broader debate yet again about ministerial codes of conduct and just what sort of behavioural standards these people who are elected to be the leaders of this country should set to the nation that votes for them?
I should say in this particular case, Jeremy, it's almost unique because this is not really a grey area. Everyone knows, because they're published in black and white, what the guidelines are for ex-cabinet ministers, and there are now certainly half a dozen cabinet ministers who have left office and obeyed those rules. So on this occasion, Mr. Blunkett deciding to have a different interpretation of them is surprising, and it will, I think, lead to people questioning the Prime Minister's own integrity, in as much as when it suits him, he seems to have a very loose interpretation of his own rules, even although he himself has stated in the foreword to those rules that he expects ministers and ex-ministers to obey the spirit of the guidelines and not just the letter. Although it is important to say that in his defence, David Blunkett can point to a letter from Patrick Mayhew, who chairs this business link, this reference body for potential business links, who does make clear that his powers are not statutory, compliance with them is voluntary.
Adam, thank you very much. We're going to hear from the opposition in just a moment. Let me first tell you roughly what this statement says from David Blunkett, who of course is the Work and Pensions Secretary. He says, "I've taken this step not only to avoid continuing misinterpretation of the position, but to protect my family and friends from further intrusion." Let's talk to Chris Grayling now, who's the shadow leader of the House of Commons and a man who very recently has said it is difficult to see how Mr. Blunkett can remain in office. Is that still your view tonight after hearing his statement, Mr. Grayling?
It is my view. I've heard nothing tonight that changes my mind about the events of the last few months. If anything, the fact that Mr. Blunkett has chosen to dispose of the shares in this way so quickly after my letter to the Prime Minister and to the Cabinet Secretary, it suggests to me that he and the government recognise that there's a case to answer.
Tell me what concerns you most about this. Where do you think he has stepped over the line?
I think there are really two big concerns remaining. The first is over Mr. Blunkett's decision not to follow the guidelines and refer his appointment to the advisory committee that's been set up for that purpose. I've looked back again through the rules today, and I am as certain as I can be that Mr. Blunkett hasn't complied with the ministerial code in failing to contact the committee. The other point, which still remains, is Mr. Blunkett chose to join the company for a short period of time, to buy this stake in the company, and then after he'd returned to ministerial office, still put himself into a position where he was having private meetings with the people whose family owned the company. And I think that shows a monumental lack of judgment. I'm pretty clear in my own mind that that's certainly a breach of the spirit of the ministerial code, something Mr. Blair is always talking about as being important. And just because Mr. Blunkett's disposed of the shares now doesn't mean he should escape from a proper investigation and potentially sanction if he has broken the code.
How important is it for members of Parliament, and particularly those who reach ministerial level, to set a code of conduct that is perhaps even above the norms that most of us would aspire and adhere to?
I think it's extremely important, and what's more, the Prime Minister thinks it's extremely important. He has said on several occasions that he is absolutely adamant his ministers will follow the letter of the code, but also will follow the spirit of the code. And he's made it clear that he expects that from his ministers. Now, to my mind, there are big question marks over whether Mr. Blunkett has done that in the past few months. If he doesn't, then he must resign, and we certainly need a proper investigation as to whether he has or whether he hasn't.
Are you calling for him tonight to resign?
I want the inquiry to take place first, but in saying that, I continue to hold the view that I think Mr. Blunkett's judgment has been so lacking that I don't see how he can remain in office. But the proper process is to have an inquiry first, and then after that, if he's been found to have been out of line, then he should go.
And how quickly does this need to be done to clear the air?
Well, I think it should be done immediately. I mean, we saw the precedent, ironically, the first time round with Mr. Blunkett, when there was an external inquiry, someone brought in from outside to look at what had happened, to listen to those who've made contradictory statements and form a view over what should happen. I think we need a repeat of that now.
Conservative shadow leader of the Commons, Chris Grayling, thank you very much indeed. So just a reminder that David Blunkett tonight issuing a statement saying that he's sold his shares in DNA Bioscience. Mr. Blair says that draws an iron under it, that the matter is closed. The Conservative leader of the Commons saying it's a resigning matter, but there must be an inquiry first. He believes David Blunkett's behaviour has been wrong. He has shown a lack of judgment. The story goes on. Now, a loyalist paramilitary group in Northern Ireland says it will stand down in response to the IRA's move to decommission its weapons. But the decision's known to be part of a deal to end a violent feud between loyalist groups, which has claimed 4 lives in recent months. Guys, David Blevins is in Belfast. David, a lot of scepticism about the real motive for this announcement.
There is serious scepticism, Jeremy, and I suppose that there is some grounds for that, given that the LVF, while it is very small in number, is one of the most notoriously ruthless paramilitary groups Northern Ireland has ever known. The LVF was responsible for some of the most brutal crimes of the Northern Ireland Troubles. Among those, the shooting dead of the Sunday World journalist Martin O'Hagan back in September 2001. I've been speaking today to his editor, Jim McDowell.
The more innocent Catholics they murdered, the more that the Catholic population would turn on the IRA and get the provost to stop the killing. And that's how they operated. They were prepared to butcher innocent Catholics to try to put pressure on the IRA, and that was their mindset.
Billy Wright, the man they called King Rat, was the founder of the LVF. He himself, just 18 months into the LVF campaign, was shot dead inside the Maze prison. Now, Wright set up the LVF when his unit of the much larger Ulster Volunteer Force was stood down for breaching the ceasefire. In the last 6 months alone, feuding between those two groups has claimed 4 lives. But weeks of secret talks resulted in a truce yesterday. And with the feud over and the IRA's so-called armed struggle over, the LVF felt that the time had come for its campaign of violence to come to an end too. Now, victims of LVF violence will take some convincing, and the nationalist community, I suppose, has some grounds for its scepticism. The LVF may have been the first paramilitary group here to decommission weapons, and the only group to do so in a public fashion, but that turned out to be nothing more than a gimmick a couple of years ago. So if their latest words turn into actions, and they really do stand down their various units, and they do begin the process of decommissioning all their weapons, then there will be very little excuse for the larger loyalist paramilitary groupings not to follow suit, Jeremy.
David Blevins, thank you very much. David reporting from Belfast. Let's just take you through the headlines now. David Blunkett has asked his sons to dispose of shares he bought in a DNA testing company. And just to hear the very latest, we're hearing the Blunkett family will make no profit on the disposal of the shares, details of which are still being finished. That's according to a spokesman for the Cabinet Minister himself. He has called the decision one which he hopes will bring an end to the intrusion in his family affairs. A new test being introduced tomorrow for people who want to be British citizens. The questions include knowing who needs a television licence, what the Queen does and where Geordies come from. And youngsters have been able to buy knives and alcohol on the internet without any checks to see if they're over 18. Officials are now calling for the government to consider a complete ban on the sale of knives on the net. You're watching Sky News. Next up, live at 5, we go out there with
forgotten cases buried in time.
27 years ago, and you're just telling me this now?
Shrouded in circumstance.
Todd was seen with a murder weapon that night.
Exposed by lies.
But I was with him. You were asleep after drinking all night.
Eventually, the truth will surface. Cold Case, Wednesday the 16th of November on Sky 3.
Do you think oil companies could do more to improve our environment?
If these guys want to be in business in 50 years' time, then it's like the responsibility to me and my next generation, my children. And if they want to be responsible for their companies and for the next generation of owners of that company, then they've got to be investing now in these other alternative energy resources, I guess.
When you're in business, you want to be, well, in business. Not having to worry about handsets, bills, all that other stuff. With Vodafone, you get a direct line to your very own team of experts who'll help smooth the way. Make the most of now with Vodafone.
How can they keep this up? Cod liver oil only $1.49, that's 66% off.
You really can't afford to miss the better than half price sale, now at Holland & Barrett.
The ING Direct Savings account is for everyone. You can move your money in and out whenever you like. It's got one high rate of 4.75%. And there are no catches. That's why 98% of our customers are happy to recommend us. It's easy. Call now or go online. ING Direct. It's your money we're saving.
Teach your children well. Their father's help did slowly go by. Don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh.
The 7-seat Verso. Have kids, keep your style.
I know they love you.
Time to get out there with Matt Smith, who's at a music launch in the West End of London.
Good evening, Jeremy. More details on why exactly I'm here later, but first let's start our roundup in the States, where Clive Owen and Jennifer Aniston have launched their new movie. Derailed, which opens across the US next month, is the story of Clive Owen's successful businessman who gets derailed. See what they've done there? When he has a fling with Jennifer Aniston's character. And in a classic bit of name-dropping to reporters at the premiere, Jen says it was actually her mate Julia Roberts that told her to take the job, while the two of them were sharing a macrobiotic yogurt over lunch.
She just happened to, right after I'd gotten the script, about a half hour later we all were having lunch and she kind of out of the blue said, has anybody ever worked with Clive Owen? And I just sort of said, well, I just actually got a script with his name attached, and she said, if you can work with him, do it.
Okay, some other news as well that we'll bring you a bit later on, but I'll also tell you why I'm here a little bit later on. It's the Eurythmics are back together, first new material in 6 years.
Thanks very much indeed, Matt. We look forward to that. More about the Eurythmics coming up from Matt during the course of the evening later. On Sky News, selling up under pressure. David Blunkett gives up his shares. The Prime Minister says it's time to let the matter rest there, but the opposition don't agree. Very shortly we'll be hearing reaction and the main story on David Blunkett and his future.
The new Decamate from Black & Decker has a powerful scraper, sander and screwdriver. So the preparation gets done a lot quicker than some people might have thought.
Wherever pain takes you, Solpadeine Plus has the power to bring you back. Solpadeine Plus, the power to bring you back from pain.
Out of the picture, out of the frame, and now when you see me,
HP PhotoSmart compact printers print brilliant colour photos directly from your camera without a PC. Brilliant meets simple. HP invents. Buy the HP PhotoSmart 335 for only $99.99 and save £50.
From the creator of The Nightmare Before Christmas, Johnny Depp.
Play dead. Sorry.
Helena Bonham Carter. This Halloween, see Tim Burton's Corpse Bride.
I think I'll take the long way home.
I found the job I always wanted.
I can't wait till Saturday.
I can see for miles.
I bought her flowers on the way home.
I love autumn.
I hate winter. I got tickets to see them live.
I managed to get a window seat.
I wish you were here.
I booked a room with a view. I slept like a baby.
I did it.
I wish I was up there.
I checked my lottery numbers. I won.
I'm Ode. Internet at the touch of a button. Only from O2. See what you can do.
I think it would be easier for some to strip off than others to begin with, though. I remember reading where Annette Crosby thought, how's she going to do it? And yet,
and she's
one by one they all did it.
She's the one of them all that's got a real figure, hasn't she?
Annette Crosby?
Aye. Oh no, it's not Annette Crosby, it's the other one. What's her name? I can't remember. But she's got big knockers like that.
Great movies are what we're talking about.
Coming up in a moment on Sky News at 6, selling up, David Blunkett disposes of his shares, but will it satisfy the critics? A late licence for crime, critics of round-the-clock drinking speak out. And just how British are you? We put that citizenship to the test.
The weather, in association with Qatar Airways, your 5-star airline.
Hello there. Well, there's been a lot of very heavy rain around today and also some very, very strong winds. In the southeast, there's been this whole blanket of cloud through much of the day. You can see it feeding all the way up through parts of Spain, through parts of France, there through the Low Countries and towards Norway as well. It is gradually now edging its way eastwards and taking the heaviest of the rain with it. However, there's wet weather elsewhere as well, particularly heavy. This little belt here that works its way down western parts of Britain at the moment, and it's also very, very windy in the north as well. Now, later on, this very heavy rain will continue its journey eastwards, but it is going to fizzle out as it does so. So I think Scotland will have the heaviest rain there. Eventually, though, it should move away altogether. By first thing then, it looks like there's going to be some fairly nasty showers there in the southeast. Also a batch of rather heavy showers for the northwest as well. They'll be there first thing, but eventually they should begin to fade out. So it looks like for many parts of Britain then, and also northern parts of Ireland, it should be a fine day. And for most of us, it should be dry. Just a tiny chance of a shower. However, in the southwest, there's already the belt of cloud. The weather's going to get wet again later on.
The weather, in association with Qatar Airways, your 5-star airline.
On Sky News at 6 o'clock, Blunkett sells up. The pension secretary says he will ditch his shares in a DNA testing company. The PM says the matter's closed. Plug into Britain, the new test for budding citizens. Boozing battleground, the rising casualties of binge drinking. Knives on the line, the children's market for deadly weapons. Tresco's ton. England's top order make a shaky start in Pakistan though. And flying without moving. How to get on top of the latest adrenaline rush.
Live from the Sky News Centre, this is Sky News with Jeremy Thompson.
Very good evening. David Blunkett has asked his sons to sell off the controversial shares he bought in a DNA testing company. The Conservatives claimed that he was breaking ministerial rules by keeping the shares. In a statement released in the past half hour, the Pension Secretary said there had been no conflict of interest. He said his family would make no profit from the sales of the shares. Mr. Blunkett said, "I am not prepared even to have the appearance that there could be any potential future conflict whilst the Trust retains any shares in DNA Bioscience. I have therefore asked my sons to authorise the trustees to dispose of the shares. They have agreed to this. I've taken this step not only to avoid continuing misinterpretation of the position, but also to protect family and friends from further intrusion and hope that that will be respected." Tony Blair said he believed no further action was needed. The matter was closed, but the shadow leader of the House of Commons, Chris Grayling, told us he was still calling for a full inquiry.
I've heard nothing tonight that changes my mind about the events of the last few months. If anything, the fact that Mr. Blunkett has chosen to dispose of the shares in this way, so quickly after my letter to the Prime Minister and to the Cabinet Secretary, it suggests to me that he and the government recognise that there's a case to answer.
Adam Bolton, our political editor, has been monitoring all this live from Downing Street. Adam, what do you make of it, and is this the end of the matter?
Well, the government is clearly trying to draw a line under this. The Prime Minister saying that as far as he's concerned, it's closed. Clearly the implication of that is that whatever mistakes Mr. Blunkett made, they've now been put to rights, and his office is confirming that there will be no profit on the £15,000 he originally invested in DNA Bioscience. However, it remains on the record that Mr. Blunkett acknowledges that he did not follow the ministerial code, although there does seem to be a slight get out there that aspects of it were should rather than must, and so there was a voluntary nature. And also, as we heard from Chris Grayling in the Conservative opposition, there is the question of Mr. Blunkett's judgment. This is by no means the first time in the last couple of years that has been called into question. So I think it will really depend how hard that the opposition decide to push this, and whether indeed there are further revelations about Mr. Blunkett. I don't think he could survive another one, and certainly the fact that he appears to have continued to have private relations with the man in charge of this company, and also the man who introduced him to the blonde estate agent, which led to more tabloid embarrassment, does suggest that there may well be more questions to come, whether or not Mr. Blair thinks they should be entertained or not.
Tell us why the Prime Minister sticks so closely to David Blunkett when his position, according to the opposition and to even some of his own colleagues in the Labour Party, is getting less and less tenable.
Well, I think there's a certain circling of the wagons going on, that there's a belief within that building behind me that people like us are so-and-sos who in the media are just simply out to do them in for the sake of it. There's a feeling that David Blunkett has had trivial things, relatively trivial things, thrown up in his face. So that kind of motivates them, if you like. But there's also the straightforward political calculation. Were David Blunkett to be the second close ally of Mr. Blair, forced out of cabinet for a second time, i.e. following Peter Mandelson, then questions about the Prime Minister's own judgment would inevitably be asked.
Thanks very much, Adam. A little bit of breaking news coming out of the United States, and they, of course, have had a lot more scandal than even surrounds the British government at the moment, with the stepping down last week of Dick Cheney, the Vice President's Chief of Staff, Lewis Liddy, the man at the back of the picture there in the yellowy coloured tie, following the indictment by the federal grand jury over allegations that he may have leaked the name of a CIA agent to journalists. Now, Dick Cheney, the Vice President, has appointed David Addington as his new Chief of Staff to replace Lewis Libby, who was indicted in that investigation. David Addington, born in 1957 until recently, has become the counsel to Dick Cheney, which is a position he's held for the last 4 years. A little bit of breaking news on the football front as well. Hearts up there in Edinburgh, a lot of controversy over the chairman there, Russian chairman, and the money he's brought to the club there, and who's going to be the new manager after George Burley stepped aside. We now hear that George Fuchs, who of course is a Labour front bencher, has resigned as the Hearts chairman. Phil Anderton is leaving his role as chief executive there, and they're still waiting to find out who the new manager of Hearts is going to be. Lots of things happening. We'll bring you more on the David Blunkett situation very shortly. In the meantime, what is it to be British? Well, if you're thinking to be British means roast beef, warm beer, Blackpool Pier, then you've got it wrong. It apparently is all about knowing the voltage of your plug sockets, what the Queen does, and where Geordies come from. All part of a new Home Office test for people who apply to be British citizens. There are no questions about history. Instead, the exam's designed to teach people how to integrate into life in the UK and to share British values. Sky's Victoria Brining's been taking a look at what it all involves.
Well, the citizenship test is made up of 24 questions covering history, law and society. Some of the questions include, when did 18-year-olds get the vote? Is it A, 1918, B, 1928 or C, 1969? Well, more recent than you thought perhaps, the answer is C. Another one for you to try if you didn't get that one right is, if you spill someone's pint in a pub, what usually happens next? A, you would offer to buy the person another pint. B, you would offer to dry their wet shirt with your own. Or C, you may need to prepare for a fight in the car park. Well, the only British thing to do, of course, is buy them another pint. The answer is A, naturally. So how did the average Brit fare on the test?
Which of these courts uses a jury system? Magistrates Court, Crown Court, Youth Court, County Court?
Magistrate.
Crown. Can you say the question again, please?
Magistrates Court.
I'd say Crown Court, she says it, yeah.
County?
Magistrates?
Or Crown Court?
Crown Court.
But the test may not be necessary. A survey from the Commission for Racial Equality found people who most strongly identify themselves as British are from ethnic minorities, whereas British whites would be more likely to describe themselves as English, Scottish, Welsh or Northern Irish.
Thanks very much, Victoria. Let's go nationwide now. 3 people have been charged with murder of a 23-year-old man during the riots in Birmingham. Isaiah Young Sam died after being stabbed in the city during clashes between Asian and black youths earlier this month. The 3 men will appear in court tomorrow. An Al-Qaeda suspect being held in the UK will no longer face extradition because authorities have taken too long to act. Faj Hassan Faraj was originally imprisoned for possession of a stolen passport in 2002. He continued to be held after Italy requested extradition. Now a three-year deadline's passed. It's thought that he'll be deported to Libya. British mobile phone group O2 has agreed a takeover worth £18 billion. The company will keep its UK base and branding following the deal with Spanish telecoms giant Telefonica. The internet is making it all too easy for youngsters to buy knives and alcohol online without any checks to see if they're over 18. In one test by trading standards officers, a 13-year-old boy bought 2 sets of kitchen knives and a case of wine. He even got them delivered to his home. In another survey, only 2 out of 5 big-name retailers asked for any age identification. Officials are now calling for the government to consider a complete ban on the sale of knives on the internet. Sky's Joel Hills reports.
This is a ripper saw for going through snow.
And it's one of a series of knives purchased by a 13-year-old boy using the internet. Richard Beckett went on a shopping spree using his Solo card, a payment card, not a credit card, available to anyone over the age of 11. Retailers should have checked his date of birth, but they didn't.
I thought it'd be a lot harder. I didn't think I'd get anything, but I got all this.
We borrowed Richard's Solo card details and went surfing for ourselves. First up, the Argos website and a 7-piece knife set. Argos checked his accounts to ensure funds were available, but they didn't check his age. The order was duly processed, home delivery guaranteed.
I think retailers have got to get used to the fact that they're web traders now as well as high street traders, and that presents a whole new range of issues and problems. And the information we're publishing today is by way of a wake-up call to those retailers to work hard on getting their act together.
The fact is, more and more young people are carrying knives. 4 years ago, 4,616 were found guilty of having a blade in a public place. Last year, the number of convictions had reached 6,839, a rise of 67%. And the consequences are being felt on the front line of the NHS.
It varies from purpose-built knives, flick knives, lock knives, which can really only be described as being for one use, and that is violence, to your standard kitchen knife. We see steak knives in people's pockets, we see things like that. And we can also see, a screwdriver is quite a common implement to carry around.
This is how they deal with the problem of knives in schools in the United States. The British government wants to give teachers here the power to carry out random searches, but if its violent crime reduction bill does become law next year, it will be too late for Luke Walmsley. The 14-year-old was stabbed by a fellow pupil at his school in Lincolnshire in November 2003. A street crime carried out in the school corridor. Joel Hills, Sky News.
We've had this statement from Argos. Quote, Argos takes this issue very seriously. We believe that our safeguards are similar to most other retailers. However, we will review our procedures in light of your inquiry to see if there are any ways in which we can make them more robust. A little bit of breaking news now, and that's that old story of bird flu. Hardly a day goes by without a new outbreak. The latest is from Canada, and we're hearing out of Ottawa on the Reuters wires that Canada has discovered a strain of the H5 avian flu in wild birds. It's now checking to see whether it is the to quote, killer strain H5N1 that has spread into Europe in the last week. Officials there say it's definitely H5. We're still testing for the N subtype. There are 9 different strains of the H5 avian flu. We'll be keeping a check on that story, of course. Now, less than a month until drinking round the clock becomes legal in England and Wales. The government is confident the plans will work, but critics say they're no more than a licence for crime, binge drinking and violence. So how bad could things get? We sent Sky News cameras into a hospital in Scotland where extended drinking hours have been a reality for years.
Drunk, violent and injured. Wounded, bloodied and very often angry. It's an alarmingly routine night at this Scottish hospital A&E department. Of course, you'd expect to find injured and drunk people here, but even doctors accustomed to seeing the after effects of violence say it's getting worse.
Tend to be seeing a lot more high violent assaults where people are really getting into big fights. There's a lot of people coming in who've been stamped on as well, using implements, bottles. I think things are generally getting a little bit worse. The level of intoxication that we see is much higher. And we have our ward here where we observe people, and we're seeing an awful lot more young people coming in really collapsed states, all due to alcohol.
You were unconscious for about a minute.
This man was attacked in the street because a drunken group took exception to his long hair.
I don't think it's a case of Scotland becoming more violent. I think it's just society at large. It's just the way it is later on at night. There's no control.
And that's the question that's proving the most difficult for politicians and policymakers to address. Paul Brennan, Sky News.
We showed our report to the Culture Secretary, Tessa Jowell, and she defended the government plans.
We are determined, therefore, through the Licensing Act and through the powers that we'll be taking under the Violent Crime Bill, to give the police additional powers to crack down on that kind of behaviour, and we will not tolerate it. And we will also hold licensees to account. They will have to justify the responsibility they have for selling alcohol.
Top story is now on Sky News at 6. David Blunkett has asked his sons to dispose of shares he bought in a DNA testing company. Pension Secretary said he hoped selling the shares would protect his family and friends from what he called further intrusion. The Prime Minister said he considers the matter to be closed. A new test being introduced tomorrow for people who want to be British citizens. Questions include knowing who needs a television licence, what the Queen does and where Geordies come from. And youngsters have been able to buy knives and alcohol on the internet without any checks to see if they're over 18. Officials are now calling for the government to consider a complete ban on the sale of knives on the net. Now, as we promised a little while ago, the Eurythmics are releasing a brand new single, and Sky's Matt Smith is in central London to see it all. Matt.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening. Welcome to Mayfair, where, as you say, the Eurythmics are launching their greatest hits album and a new single. Obviously, when you're putting a greatest hits album together of a band that are no longer together, you expect to trawl the archives, so to speak, to find the stuff to put on it. But 9 weeks ago, the band got together and decided to write some new material, first in 6 years, and they're with us now here on Sky News, live on Sky News. Dave and Annie, good evening.
Hi.
So tell me about this single, first of all, because your fans are going to be quite excited about this. 9 weeks ago, something happened. What happened?
Annie was staying with me in Los Angeles, having a little holiday, and we went to visit my new studio, and 45 minutes later, basically, we'd written the basis of I've Got a Life, and that evening we drove home playing it in the car. That's what happened, really.
Given that, then, was it something you'd...
And they're all in big format, and it's like our life's work.
People get together in bands because they're mates. Usually the business then gets in the way, they fall out. When you got back together again to record this new single, was the chemistry kind of there again?
Well, we did it back to front, really. First we lived together, and then we fell out, and then we formed a duo. And then we made about 9 albums in 9 years. That's an album a year. And then we got sick of each other, and then we sort of couldn't stand it. So for about 7 years we didn't see each other. And then we fell in again with Peace. And then ever since Peace, really, we've been friends.
Okay, well, new single's out today, album's out very shortly. Just another story we've been doing on Sky News today is the Britishness test. They're asking people what you should be asked if you were British. I mean, what question, as someone who lives in LA now, what would you ask?
Well, you've been talking about binge drinking, haven't you? Just before this, yeah. Because I think British are more like whinge drinkers, really, sort of drink and then whinge about things, and then they get unhinged, and then they go on the fringe, and that's the kind of question
it all rhymes. Annie, if someone coming to the UK, what question would you think they should be asked to prove they're into British life?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, the thing, okay, I would say one thing.
Is it a
London, we're in London now. It's a hugely cosmopolitan city. And I think what this city represents is that many people from different cultures all around the world can get on with things. And I think that is the British, if you like, that is our tolerance, our openness, our availability, and the way that we actually enjoy each other's cultures.
I've got a question. Is it a competition? All right. To prove you're British, you would have to... What do you carry with you to the beach?
Don't know.
An umbrella.
Right, thank you very much. The jokes and the music are back. Back to you.
Matt, I would have thought the one thing that should be in the Britishness test is name the top 6 Eurythmic hits, really, shouldn't it?
It should be. Yeah, these guys probably know.
Jolly good, thanks very much. Nice to hear them back together again. Coming up on Sky News at 6, up and away, we test a parachute-free skydive. And in sport, more heartache in Edinburgh. Find out who's left the club now.
There's a new day at Sky News.
I'll be live at 5 in the Sky News studio. We're telling you the stories that matter most.
My Sky Report team will deliver a gender-setting analysis at 7 o'clock. It's going to be fresh, fiery appointment to View Television.
I'll be offering an international perspective with World News Tonight at 8. I hope to bring behind-the-scenes analysis from my days as a Clinton official.
All this and the latest breaking stories. Sky News. News people.
Technology has made your morning easier. Why not your shave? The new Philips Smart Touch XL is designed to shave more with 3 shaving rings, not 1. And now it pivots to stay on your face and neck, so even tricky hairs are cut. Make every stroke count.
Vectra and new Signum. Take control.
Delicious apricots, now only 99p, that's 60% off. You really can't afford to miss the better than half price sale, now at Holland & Barrett.
Turn off the amber light function on your Philips high-definition flat TV and it's like going back in time. The only flat TV with amber light from Philips. You'll never go back to ordinary TV.
Look at her, clocking my salt content. I'm in there.
Oh, get over yourself. Check the label. I've got less salt than you.
Get a load of these salt levels.
Oh, do put them away, dear.
Your food can tell you how much salt it contains. Always check the label.
I blame you.
Eat no more than 6 grams of salt a day.
Reason 243. 20% of all champagne and sparkling wines. More reasons to shop at Morrison's.
It feels good to be out in the open. Philips Open MRI Scanner. All of the detail of a closed MRI with less of the confinement.
Sports time with Desi. What's going on at Hearts?
I think it's a case of blood on the boardroom floor. It's quite incredible what's been going on there. The crisis at the Scottish Premier League side deepening tonight. It's taken another twist in the last couple of hours with the Chief Executive Phil Anderton being sacked following an emergency board meeting this afternoon. Non-executive chairman George Foulkes has resigned in protest at Anderton's dismissal. All of this 9 days after George Burley stood down. In charge of the place now, Roman Romanov, son of Vladimir Romanov, the man who put the money in. Other football headlines tonight. George Best getting out of his hospital bed today and his condition has improved greatly. Doctors treating the former Manchester United star are pleased with his progress but say they'll keep him in intensive care for a few more days. 100 by Marcus Trescothick saved England's cricketers in their first match in Pakistan. He finished on 124 not out as they closed day one against the Patrons 11 on 256 for 9. Could be a new British tennis number one by the end of the week. It won't be Andrew Murray. Greg Rosetsky will replace Tim Henman if he reaches the third round of the Paris Masters. Rosetsky beat the Italian Andrea Seppi in the first round today. More on owning football clubs in Sportsline at 6:30.
They'll be calling it the Romanov dynasty, won't they? Sorry, John. Little something now for you adrenaline junkies, for those who think modern life doesn't really offer enough thrills. How about free falling with the whipping across your face at 150 miles an hour and no parachute. It's not a lot more complicated than it looks. Essentially a giant upturned hairdryer lets you feel as if you're falling from thousands of feet, but without all those worries about how to land. Our man David Bowden safely back to Earth now. What's going on above us now though, Steph?
The weather, in association with Qatar Airways, your 5-star airline.
Well, I don't really think he needed to go to such extreme measures in order to find some very, very windy weather. It's been exceptionally windy in some parts of Scotland today, and there's also been a lot of very heavy rain. There's been wet weather elsewhere too, particularly for the southeast. This whole chain of cloud that's worked its way up through parts of Spain, through France, the Low Countries, and up towards Norway. I think by first thing tomorrow, though, that area of rain should have moved away. It'll gradually track its way eastwards, and tomorrow should be far calmer and fairly sunny.
The weather, in association with Qatar Airways, your 5-star airline.
Thanks, Steph. You're watching Sky News at 6. Reminder of our top story tonight. David Blunkett has asked his sons to dispose of shares he bought in a DNA testing company. Pension Secretary said he hoped selling the shares would protect his family and friends from what he called further intrusion. The Prime Minister said he considered the matter to be closed. If you're watching in the Republic of Ireland, then you can see all the latest news from where you are in just a few moments. For everyone else, it's Sportsline with Desi, including more on that latest crisis at Scottish Premier League side Hearts, and Portsmouth gets tough with a wayward winger.
I can handle getting older. But getting older and still getting blemishes?
Now there's a moisturiser that fights 7 signs of ageing and the appearance of blemishes. New Olay Total Effects Anti-Aging Blemish Care for clearer and younger looking skin.
Happy birthday. Definitely.
For your free sample of Total Effects Anti-Aging Blemish Care, go to olay.co.uk. Love the skin you're in.
Your escape in a Vauxhall from the new Special Edition Active range. Now with the legendary 0% finance offer at your local Vauxhall retailer. For an Active Special Edition brochure, text Active to 84118.
It's your last chance for the Curry sale. There's £200 off this Sony 17-inch widescreen LCD TV, now only $399. And this Toshiba combined DVD recorder and video is an amazing $199, £100 off. Hurry, the Curry sale ends Wednesday. Curry's, always lowering prices.
Got heartburn? Get Gaviscon Cool tablets in a convenient new pack. Heartburn relief has never been handier.
When you're in business, you want to be, well, in business. Not having to worry about handsets, bills, all that other stuff. With Vodafone, you get a direct line to your very own team of experts who'll help smooth the way. Make the most of now with Vodafone.
Find out what it feels like when someone else recognizes all you have to offer. With insight and advice, Monster is much more than a job site. We bring you all the tools to uncover a better, smarter, more prepared you. Helping more job seekers find the right opportunity in the right place at the right time. We are changing the way people create their future.
Okay. Dear Santa, I've been a good boy this year. Babysitting, dog walking, and unblocking my son's drains. So what I'd like for Christmas is Sky TV, which is only 149 quid for a whole year's worth of entertainment. Gregory Henderson, aged 61 3/4. P.S. I'm all right for socks.
Give Sky TV as a gift. Call 08704 15 15 14.
Sportsline on Sky News. Sponsored by The Sun.
Good evening to you. It's all about power and money on Sportsline this evening, and we've got plenty of it to get through in the next 30 minutes. There's a crisis developing at Hearts. Within the last few minutes, there's been a meltdown in the boardroom at the Edinburgh club. We'll update you with what we know on tonight's show. And is this the man to rebuild the Villa? We're going to be hearing from the consortium that wants to buy Aston Villa Football Club. And away from the football, 10 out of 10 for this fella, Marcus Trescothick, 1 out of 10 for pretty much the rest of the England team on a rude awakening on their first tour match. Welcome to Sportsline tonight. Within the last few minutes, we've learned that the top 2 men at Hearts Football Club have left. Phil Anderson, the chief executive at Tynecastle, has been sacked. That was following an emergency board meeting this afternoon. There's more on this. In protest, the non-executive chairman, George Folks, has walked out as well. Roman Romanov, the son of the majority shareholder Vladimir Romanov, is going to take up both of those jobs. And the departures, of course, come after 9 chaotic days at Tynecastle, with the manager George Burley parting company with the club first. After a great start to the season, Hearts lost for the first time on Saturday, and they've been replaced at the top of the table by Celtic on goal difference. Aston Villa have promised fans that they'll only allow a takeover if it's good for the club. The holding company there revealed today that it had an approach, but it was only speculative. They hadn't had any talks with anyone just yet, but their chairman and majority shareholder, Doug Ellis, has vowed to study that bid carefully. It's come from lifelong Villa fan Michael Neville, who represents an Irish-based property company. Ellis says he'll only sell if it's in the best interests of the club.
This one seems to have a lot more foundation. It's a local businessman, a lifelong Villa fan, who's fronting it all. The company that are apparently behind the bid have a £1 billion worth of assets, which is a lot of money. So yes, it seems a lot better. The offer is good as well. It's £5.60 a share, which is well above the going rate at the moment. So I think it's very interesting.
You've been named as fronting the bid. I mean, would that be true?
I have no comment. Because of stock exchange rules, I can make no comment at all.
Can you tell us, are you a Villa fan?
I am, lifelong Villa fan, since I was about 9 years old.
And a local businessman?
I am, yeah. I grew up in Erdington and I live here now. Other than that, I have no comment.
Other football tonight, Aston Villa taking on Manchester United in the Premiership. Darius Vassell moved to City in the summer after 8 happy years at Aston Villa, and he thinks he's become a better player as a result.
Comparing the two, I don't really see that much difference in my game. I just think that at Aston Villa, I think the people there, because I was there so long, were used to me as a player, used to what I could do and used to how I play. So I don't really think I shone as much maybe in the latter stages of my career there.
Rafael Benitez says Liverpool are a better side this year than when they won the Champions League. They're unbeaten and joint top of Group G, level on points with Chelsea going into tomorrow's game against the bottom club, Anderlecht.
Steven Gerrard started out on the right-hand side against West Ham, and it's a role he may be asked to fill again.
It's an option for us, no? He's a player that can, I say, after the game, he can cross, beat players, shoot, and this position gives to us more options for Sissoko, Alonso, Hammond. Then we'll have more good players on the pitch.
The Gerrard experiment worked on Saturday, with Liverpool bouncing back from defeats to Fulham and Crystal Palace, as they strive to find the kind of consistency in the Premiership that they've demonstrated in Europe.
The team is stronger this year. In the Champions League we are playing well. In the Premier sometimes play well, sometimes not so well. But the team is more consistent than the last season.
And while Rafa Benitez questioned his players' attitude after defeat at Fulham, he believes their game mentality isn't only suited to the Champions League.
Liverpool need good players, good attitude, good play, score goals, but the mentality of the players is good. When you talk about the Champions League mentality or the Premier mentality, I think that it's almost the same.
So with Benitez confident his side's making progress, Steven Gerrard could become a more consistent feature of Liverpool's right flank. Vinny O'Connor, Sky News.
Rangers are in Slovakia, where they'll be facing Artmedia Bratislava. Alex McLeish and his players facing a vital few weeks. They're 10 points behind the leader Celtic in the Scottish Premier League, and they need to win tomorrow to have a good chance of progressing to the knockout stages.
You know, they've risen, their game has raised significantly for the Champions League games. you only have to look back at the last game against Artmedia, when we were very unlucky not to win the game. That was a terrific performance, but the tempo went down a little bit in the second half. But we've missed a barrel of chances in the first half. We were the favourites that night, we didn't win. Artmedia favourites tomorrow night. It means nothing, bookies odds.
Let's go back to our top story tonight. Blood on the boardroom carpet at Hearts, takeovers at Aston Villa. Joining us from our central London studio is the editor of Soccer Investor, Brian Sturgis. Brian, very good evening to you.
Good evening.
I wanted to talk about Aston Villa to start with, but of course what's going on at Hearts, another publicly listed football club, and people walking out all over the shop. Stuff for the fans and investors to worry about?
Well, I mean, what you actually see over the last couple of years generally is a lot of clubs slowly moving away from the listed model. Either going completely private. I mean, even today as well, today Friday, Celtic have decided that they're going to go more from the main market to AIM, a lesser market. So this is a kind of trend that's been going on for some time.
It's the shape of things to come, isn't it? We've seen it at Chelsea, we've seen something similar at Manchester United. It's just the inevitable at Hearts, isn't it? One man who's putting his own money in, deciding he wants to run it the way he wants to run it, and putting his son in charge of the club. Can't blame him.
Well, in many ways, it was a bit of a phase. Clubs listing on the stock market, they all did it in about 2 or 3 years, all did once, raised some money. The thing was that fans were never necessarily going to put any more money in, like institutions would, and certainly once they bought the shares, they don't sell them, so there's no liquidity in the markets. It's just really going back to the old days when there was some sugar daddy who controlled clubs, because you own a club for more reasons than the pure profit. There's prestige, there's how it promotes your local business, there's all sorts of aspects.
I'm talking about the other football club in the City news today, Aston Villa. What have you made of the comings and goings there? This Irish consortium, is that good news for Aston Villa or not?
Well, certainly in terms of price, it's good news for the shareholders, because the price of Aston Villa has steadily gone upwards. Ray Ranson's bid was 40-odd million, and this is the price is in the 50 millions currently today. Michael Neville is supposed to be a fan. Villa are a club which don't have much debt. They really need a bit of extra oomph into them. So if they're prepared to support it and put money in, then it is good for the fans.
How does a board know if they've got an investor that's a good one or a bad one? What questions have they got to ask? What kind of process have they got to go through?
Well, they've got to consider they're there for the short term and the long term. You've seen the case in Wrexham. I mean, especially with smaller clubs, are they just purely interested in the property side of the club? I mean, that would never happen in the Premier League club, of course, but I would say never. It could happen. They look at their background in other businesses. In theory, these are things that the FA should be doing, but generally the FA and leagues themselves have been quite weak in vetting people.
Yeah, they seem to wash their hands of it years ago and allow people to come in and buy clubs and convert them into PLCs. So more to come, do you think? Good news for Aston Villa fans? Let's leave it on that point. I think it must be. It sounds as if they are a club without any debt, and therefore whatever money goes in will be spent on players.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the indication seems to be that's what's actually going to happen. And Villa don't have much debt, so on balance, certainly good. And for a Villa shareholder, extremely good.
Brian, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Okay.
George Best got out of his hospital bed today and his condition has greatly improved. Doctors treating the former Manchester United star are pleased with his progress.
There's been a substantial improvement. He's actually been sitting up this morning, out of bed. I'm not sure he did smile once.
Out of bed.
Out of bed, sitting up, although he's back in bed now. He's fully conscious. And all the observations are very satisfactory.
Now on to the first day of England's tour of Pakistan. They finally took to the field today to start it, and they made a humiliating start against the patrons 11 until a century from Marcus Trescothick rescued them. He finished unbeaten on 124 as they recovered from to 256 for 9, having been 60 for 6 at one stage.
The perfect start for Marcus Trescothick. His career has come full circle. The vice-captain scored his first 100 for England in Pakistan on his first senior tour. The day after, he helped deliver supplies to remote villages, to those still affected by the Asian earthquake. He provided cricket relief for England in this 14-a-side practice match. The only solid support he received was from Ashley Giles and England new boy Matt Pryor. The backup wicketkeeper scored a powerful, impressive half-century. Having won the toss, with the priority to eke out a valuable batting time, England's top order collapsed all around Trescothick. Andrew Strauss the first to go. He left a straight one, and the rest quickly followed. The England captain, Michael Vaughan, was out for 9. Kevin Peterson, Paul Collingwood, Ian Bell and Geraint Jones scored just 8 runs between them. Good, accurate swing bowling was their undoing. The afternoon session was all about bedding down and being patient, and thanks to Giles and Pryor, England recovered some respectability. England's top order can do better, of course, so not much for Pakistan coach Bob Warmer to gauge from this first day. England's mission to learn quickly continues. Tim Abraham, Sky News, Rawalpindi.
The first sort of 3 hours was really sort of grinding out as much as you could, and then the ball got old and the bowlers got a little bit tired, and you could really sort of capitalise then on the harder balls, and you know it just took time. That was the main thing.
They bowled very well, didn't they? There's the pace bowling. There's a lot of talk about spin, but we didn't sort of see spin until much later in the game because the pace and swing bowlers were doing a good job.
Yeah, when the spinners came on, we sort of dominated them pretty quickly. We sort of, I realised it was going to be an important sort of phase of the game really, and sort of play positive as we do as a team anyway against spin. But the seamers were tougher earlier on. I'm pretty sure with the new ball when we bowl it, I think it'll be very similar.
And of course, I mean, it's been said before when the top order miss out, but obviously disappointing with them is they look to do what you do and try and spend some valuable time out in the middle, and they didn't do that.
No, they missed out this time. It was obviously 3 more innings in terms of game practice. We've still got sort of 4 or 5 days of practice in the nets really, so it's early days, isn't it? You don't want to really peak too early. Obviously today was nice to get 100, but in the context of the tour it's pretty irrelevant.
Other cricket today, India have gone 3-0 up in the one-day series with Pakistan. Wicket-keeper Mahendra Dhoni hit an unbeaten 183 off 145 balls, guiding them to a 6-wicket victory in Jaipur. His innings included 10 sixes and 16 fours. More still to come on Sportsline tonight, including how golfer Paul McGinley has reached new heights after his win at the weekend's Volvo Masters, and we'll be hearing from Greg Rosetsky as he tries to topple Tim Henman as Britain's top tennis player.
Sportsline on Sky News, sponsored by The Sun.
There's a new day at Sky News.
I'll be live at 5 in the Sky News studio. We're telling you the stories that matter most.
My Sky Report team will deliver a gender-setting analysis at 7 o'clock. It's going to be fresh, fiery, appointment to view television.
I'll be offering an international perspective with World News Tonight at 8. I hope to bring behind-the-scenes analysis from my days as a Clinton official.
All this and the latest breaking stories. Sky News. News people.
He's saving his 20%. They're saving their 20%. He's saving his 20%. She's saving her 20%. And she's saving hers. Save 20% of the energy you use every day and you'll help prevent climate change.
Cashy Original with 7 different whole grains. Nothing added but a touch of sunshine, a splash of rain, and a box, of course. And there's Cashy Honey for those who like something sweeter. Cashy, the 7 whole grain company.
Lavender aromatherapy oil, only $2.59. That's 60% off.
You really can't afford to miss the better than half price sale now at Holland & Barrett.
in a Vauxhall from the new Special Edition Active range. Now with the legendary 0% finance offer at your local Vauxhall retailer. For an Active Special Edition brochure, text Active to 84118.
Karen, now you've won a big prize, haven't you, love? What'd your husband say? Oh, you haven't told him.
Gala Bingo, where more people who win go.
Imagine a new feeling of freshness all day long during your period. Well, New Always and Fresh Elle is a unique combination of our protective Ultra Pad and a gentle and cleansing intimate wipe that lets you freshen up anytime, anywhere. Always feel fresh with Always and Fresh Elle.
Sportsline on Sky News. Sponsored by The Sun.
Let's take a check on the main sports headlines tonight. Managerless Hearts are a club in crisis this evening. Their chief executive, Phil Anderson, has been sacked and their chairman, George Folks, has resigned in protest. Also, Aston Villa have confirmed to the Stock Exchange that a consortium have made a preliminary approach to take the club over. Chairman and majority shareholder Doug Ellis says he'll study the bid from a lifelong Villa fan called Michael Neville very carefully. And an unbeaten 124 from Marcus Trescothick spared England's blushes in their opening tour match against Pakistan. Having been 60 for 6 at one stage, they closed on 256 for 9. Much more respectable. Greg Rosiecki remains on course to end the year as the top-ranked British tennis player after a comfortable first-round victory at the Paris Masters. He beat the Italian Andrea Seppi in straight sets.
A simple target for Greg Rosiecki in Paris: win 2 matches and become Britain's #1. He made an aggressive start. Italian qualifier Andrea Seppi was soon feeling the pressure and was broken in the 4th game. Rosiecki sometimes struggled with his second serve, but when he needed to, delivered on the big points. And successive aces secured the opening set. He didn't have it all his own way. Lapses of concentration saw him slip a breakdown in the second. But wife Lucy didn't look too concerned, and she was right. The Italian couldn't capitalise. Rosiecki stepped up a gear to break back and began to tighten the screw. The longest point in the match came at deuce at 3-all. The Briton took it, then the game to put himself firmly in charge. With his serve approaching its unreturnable best, the fastest clocked at 145 miles an hour, there seemed no way back for Seppi, and Rosiecki closed out the match without further trouble. He hasn't been ahead of Tim Henman in the rankings since 1997, but beating 3rd seed Nikolai Davydenko in the next round will make him best of British again. Craig Slater, Sky News.
Well, I felt like I played really well in the first set. Got off to an early break, and that was the key. And then, I served really well. I got down a break in the second, but then felt pretty comfortable out there. So I was really pleased. I had a tough match with him in Miami where I barely beat him in 3 sets. He's an up-and-coming player. He has had some great wins this year. He beat Juan Carlos Ferrero on clay at the French Open. He's beaten Joachim Johansson, who's 10 in the world, 1 and 2. So it's not such an easy first-round match. I played Davydenko only once. I lost to him in the 3 tight sets, and I also had 3 match points, so it's going to be a tough match, but what I'm looking forward to. Last week gave me a lot of confidence getting to the quarterfinals in St. Petersburg. I'm starting to feel like I'm playing well, so I'm looking forward to a good week. One more match and I think I get back to British #1, so that'd be great.
Well then, Greg, now Paul McGinley is into the world's top 20 golfers for the first time in his career after winning the Volvo Masters at the weekend. The Irishman's first tour title in 4 years means he's moved up 8 places from world number 26. And the Order of Merit winner Colin Montgomery's 3rd place finish hasn't moved him up a single place. He stays at 15 in that list, but it won't bother the Scot after a year to remember.
Monty says it's like winning the Premiership. So 6 years after the last, how tough this 8th Order of Merit?
Very. I think that says it all.
The year began controversially in Jakarta, an error of judgment replacing a ball that had gone missing during an interruption.
It has been astonishing the amount of coverage that it has had, and let's hope that this is the last of it and we can get back to talking about birdies and bogeys and who's winning tournaments.
There was no doubt about Monty's position though at the Open, 2nd behind Tiger Woods.
How can one be dissatisfied with the performance where you finish 2nd at the home of golf here to the best player in the world?
There was more pain. A wrist injury forced him out of action at Glen Eagles. At the All-Star Cup, though, at Celtic Manor, he showed the qualities which may make him a Ryder Cup captain on the same course in 5 years. Leadership skills which came to the fore again at the Seve Trophy. Then back to St Andrews, his first win for 19 months at the Dunhill Links.
Second in July, first in October, and it's Dunhill delight for Monty.
Monty was closing in on Michael Campbell and the Order of Merit. A third-place finish behind Woods and Daly at the Amex Championship gave him the edge going to Valderrama. And though he was caught by McGinley at the Volvo Masters after leading by 6, it meant for the Scots once again the ultimate prize.
I didn't need this. I just wanted it.
At 42, there's still time for more, and maybe still time for a first major. Jeremy Langdon, Sky News.
Now, a certain Paul Gascoigne was putting Kettering on the map over the weekend. After crying at the 1990 World Cup finals, falling in love with Lazio, but failing to woo the Chinese, Gazza's new career in football management got off to a winning start. And here to tell us all about it is his new boss, I suppose, the new owner of Kettering Town, Imran Ladek. Imran, you're very welcome this evening. Great weekend. Yeah. Tell us all about it. Was he all right?
It was fantastic. I mean, I came in, went to bed on Friday night very nervous, woke up very confident thinking, what is there to be nervous about? We've got Paul Gascoigne. Everyone's excited and we're going to win today, and we did.
Yeah, and it all went off great, unless there's something that went off behind these pictures that we don't know about. What was going on in the background to all of this?
Well, Paul arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning, which is an hour before me. I thought I'd get in early, but he was there already.
So that was good.
Yeah, he excited. Paul Davis and Paul obviously picked the team. We had a few problems with injuries and a little bit of bad luck. We dominated the game, hit the post, hit the bar, should have had a penalty, and it just felt like it was going to be one of those days where nothing went in.
Normal owners' complaints.
Yeah, but luckily...
But it did, you got the points.
Yeah.
Things are looking quite healthy. In Conference North, and people say, Conference what? So tell us about the league.
Well, obviously, at the moment it's a part-time club. But Kettering shouldn't be in the Conference North. I mean, in the same way as Manchester City and Newcastle weren't second and third division clubs. 10 years ago we had 3,000 people coming to watch, taking 12,000, 14,000 to the FA Trophy final. So
how many there on Saturday?
Just over 2,000.
Right.
We're expecting between 3 and 4 for this weekend.
Right. So he's a draw, Paul?
Definitely.
Yeah. But why Paul Gascoigne when it could have been so many others?
Well, I think when you come in and take over a new club, you want an air of optimism. You want the fans to be excited. There's nothing that could be more exciting than Paul Gascoigne.
So you're a fan?
I have to admit, yeah, definitely I'm a Spurs fan. So he's given me many great pleasures in the past. But on top of that, you know, if it was just a publicity stunt, then I wouldn't have been interested in doing that. Paul is very determined, very motivated. He's got a lot to prove. He's going about everything in absolutely the right way, and he's very focused. And I think if you can't get excited playing for Paul Gascoigne, you won't be motivated playing for anyone.
Well, that's what we would say, but I know he's got his critics, and you've got your detractors. What do they say? They don't like him too much, do they? Are there many of those?
Oh well, I think the majority of the country is behind Paul Gascoigne. I think there's cautious optimism from Kettering fans. And rightly so. Things haven't worked out at a couple of clubs, but that's because he wasn't treated, you know, in the right way. And if I treated him like that, then I wouldn't expect him to stick around either. But
so you've got a manager, you've got people coming through the turnstiles. Is the club in good, healthy shape, bearing in mind what's going on at Hearts? Do you own it all, or is somebody coming after you with a knife?
No, there's no problems there. Everyone's happy. The board is working together. We've all got a plan. We're working together, and we're very, very confident about the future.
Yeah, and the aim is league football in 133 years, within what, 6 months, a couple of seasons?
Well, I would be disappointed if we didn't go up this season, but if it doesn't happen this season, then it'll be next season. The conference itself has got a lot of money splashing around, with the owner of Umbro, I believe, owning one of the clubs, and you know, so it'll be competitive.
Good.
But yeah, I think we'll get up in the next 3 or 4 seasons.
Imran, it's been good to hear the story of the weekend. Send Paul Gascoigne our very best wishes, and thank you.
Thank you.
That's Sportsline. Good night.
The Sun. We love it.
When you feel the first symptoms of a cold, use Vicks First Defense. It's a new microgel that attacks the cold virus where it starts at the back of the nose, before it has a chance to spread and develop. New Vicks First Defense. Attack is the best form of defense.
ING Direct gives everyone 4.75% on their savings. And there really are no catches. That's why 98% of our customers are happy to recommend us. Call now or go online. ING Direct. It's your money we're saving.
Hey, it's me again, Mr. Mouse. You know, people think car insurance is boring. Until... Suddenly, what do you know? It becomes really interesting. But if you're with eSure.com and let them fix it, they'll even give you a free courtesy car to see you through. Not only could you save yourself a bunch of money with eSure.com, you'd save yourself a load of trouble, too. That's not boring. I'll tell you what is boring, though. Cats. eSure.com. Car insurance at nicest prices. Come on, give us a click.
When you're in business, you want to be, well, in business. Not having to worry about handsets, bills, all that other stuff. With Vodafone, you get a direct line to your very own team of experts who'll help smooth the way. Make the most of now with Vodafone.
At 17, I went to prison for murder. By 19, I was penniless and heartbroken. I almost drowned at 20. Then I had my memory erased at 28. And by 29, I was in Neverland. My real life doesn't need any extra drama. That's why my card is American Express.
Sir, you do realize you just rolled through a stop sign, right?
Nice bike. Did your horse die?
Can I see a driver's license and registration, please?
When you arrest people, do you ride them in on your handlebars, or do they just sit on the back with their arms around you?
I step out of the car.
Come on, seriously? I'm just having fun. I mean, you're a cop in bike shorts. It's adorable.
I have a gun.
Cool. I'm cool.
A brand new episode of Weeds. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, Sky One.
The Sky Report's coming up next. Here's Julie.
John, thanks very much. Coming up on the Sky Report tonight, he's selling up, but is it a sellout? How Blunkett's latest problems came to a head. On the eve of a memorial for the victims of 7/7, how the bomber's hometown